Today, we are going to look into the tale of a monster that lives in a large lake.
Of course I'm not talking about the Loch Ness Monster. Everyone knows that one is a total fake.
But this one is 100% completely believable.
If your mom left a plastic bag in your crib when you were a kid. Or you huff paint. So when I was a kid, my dad would take us camping to Bear Lake every now and then. This was the first time I ever heard the stories of
the Bear Lake Monster.
So I figured now that I'm an adult, it's time to get to the bottom of these stories to see if there's any truth to them or not. Bear Lake is located split between the states of Utah and Idaho. This goes back to the Great Civil War of the Bear... I'm just kidding, there's no Civil War. Bear Lake is mostly renowned for its turquoise blue water, which is pretty amazing if you've ever seen it. Bear Lake also has some surprisingly deep areas. Its deepest area has been measured at 208 feet, or 63 meters. I've also heard the rumor that it's full of underwater caverns and caves for some reason. I actually tried to look this up and I could not find any substantial information to back this up, but I heard it, so it must be true! Also looking into this, Bear Lake is over 250,000 years old? What was going on 250,000 years ago? Oh, hey, look at that. Our ancestors were water skiing on Bear Lake back then. So of course, Native Americans had been aware of Bear Lake for thousands of years. These native tribes were the first ones to report sightings of the supposed monster. They passed these stories on to the early fur trappers and traders that showed up sometime in the early 1800s. The Indians told them there was a monster in the lake that would capture them and carry them away when they were swimming. However, they also said they had not seen it for many years, ever since the buffalo disappeared from the valley.
Yeah, we all know what happened to the buffalo, don't we?
The Native Americans also described it as being serpent-like, but it had short little stubby legs and it could actually crawl up onto the beach if it wanted to. These stories would also be passed on to the first early settlers of the area. These first settlers included a man by the name of Joseph C. Rich. And he is going to be the catalyst that is going to cement the monster into modern day history. So this story really begins in 1868. Joe is 27 years old and he is living on the Idaho side of Bear Lake. Now Joe was actually considered a prominent and well-respected figure for that early settlement. However, Joe also had a little bit of a reputation of being a prankster. At some point during the year, Joe sends in a story to the local newspaper located in Salt Lake. Joe titled his article, "Monsters of Bear Lake," and it ran as headline news on August 5th. And the article read,
"About 3 weeks ago, Mr. S.M. Johnson, who lived on the east side of the lake at a place called South Aden, was going to the Sound Valley settlement 6 miles to the south of this place, and when about halfway he saw something in the lake at which that time he thought to be a drowned person. The road being some little distance from the water's edge. He rode to the beach and the waves were running pretty high. He thought it would soon wash into shore. In a few minutes, 2 or 3 feet of some kind of animal that he had never seen before were raised out of the water. He did not see the body, only the head and what he supposed to be a part of the neck. It had ears or bunches on the side of its head nearly as big as a pint cup."
What's a pint cup? Hang on. We're gonna look this up. Oh. Okay, that's a pint cup. Okay, sorry, here we go.
The waves at times would dash over its head when it would throw water from its mouth or nose. It did not drift landward, but appeared stationary. With the exception of turning its head, Mr. Johnson thought a portion of the body must lie at the bottom of the lake, or it would have drifted with the action of the water.
Oh, but this is not all. Joe includes additional sightings and additional stories from additional people. The article goes on to say,
"The next day, an animal of a monster kind was seen near the same place by a man and 3 women, who said it was swimming when they first saw it. They represented as being very large, and say it swam much faster than a horse could run on land."
So full disclosure, I have never heard these stories before. The story that I heard from my dad is different, and we'll get to that. It comes later. So I'm learning something new too. Whee! Education. The article continues with one more sighting.
On Sunday, last as N.C. Davis and Alan Davis of St. Charles and Thomas Slight and J. Collins of Paris with 6 women were returning from Fish Haven. When about midway from the latter named place to St. Charles, their attention was suddenly attracted to a peculiar motion or wave in the water about 3 miles distant. The lake was not rough, only a little disturbed by a light wind. Mr. Slight says he distinctly saw the sides of a very large animal that he was supposed to be not less than 90 feet in length. Mr. Davis don't think he saw part of the body, but is positive it must have been not less than 40 feet in length, judging by the wave it rolled upon both sides of it as it swam, and the wake it left in the rear. It was going south, and all agreed that it swam with a speed almost incredible to their senses. Mr. Davis says he never saw a locomotive travel faster and thinks it made a mile a minute easy. In a few minutes after the discovery of the first, a second one followed in its wake, but seemed to be much smaller, appearing to Mr. Slight about the size of a horse. A large one in all, and 6 small ones head southward out of sight. One of the large ones before disappearing made a sudden turn to the west, a short distance, then back to its former track. At this turn, Mr. Slight says he could distinctly see it was of a brownish color. They could judge somewhat of their speed by observing known distances on the other side of the lake.
Ugh. Yeah, that's not a very good story. No wonder why my dad never told me about these ones. Don't worry, they get better. In 1870, a more detailed sighting was reported by Charles C. Rich Jr., who just happens to be the younger brother of Joe. A reliable source, I'm sure. He told the same newspaper that a young man named Marion Thomas and 3 sons of Phineas H. Cook had just seen the monster in May. The story goes that Mr. Thomas was fishing with the 3 boys when he saw at a distance what appeared to be a duck. He joked to the boys that it might be the now famous Bear Lake monster and started to row towards it. The Cook boys soon realized that it was indeed not a duck, but a part of something much bigger. Indeed, the very same monster Mr. Thomas was joking about. Mr. Thomas still didn't believe them until he got close enough to it. Close enough, he said, that he could have shot it if he had a rifle. In his own description, Mr. Thomas says the monster's head was shaped like a serpent with only about 20 feet of its body visible, which was covered with hair or fur, something like an otter, and light brown. Extending from the upper portion of the body were 2 flippers, which he compared to the blades of the boat's oars. How do you mistake a duck for the Bear Lake monster? Then another sighting was reported in the summer of the same year by a man named Mr. Pratt. He said that a little over a week ago, he and another man named Thomas Rich were traveling on the road adjacent to the lake just south of Fish Haven. They just happened to be talking about the Bear Lake monster and how they wish they could see it to know once and for all if it was real or not. While traveling, they suddenly noticed unusual commotion out on the lake. They said, the head and a portion of the body of a creature larger round than the body of a man. Its head resembled somewhat the pictorial representation of the walrus, minus the tusk. They were only able to view about 10 feet of the creature's body. They grabbed weapons and fired. I love how that's some people's first reaction. They see something new, and the first thought that goes through their head is, let's kill it! If I saw Bigfoot or the Bear Lake monster or anything else and I had a weapon, I would have the weapon to protect myself, but I wouldn't instantly think, oh hey, there's Bigfoot, I'm gonna kill him. Oh man. I love our species. Okay, whew. They grabbed weapons and fired several shots at it, but assumed they missed it as it swam away, heading across the lake towards the east side. The 2 men watched the serpentine track of its wake on the surface of the water and guessed the monster's entire length was around 40 feet. But it all falls apart. Because, sadly enough, in 1894, over 20 years after making his first allegations, Joseph C. Rich finally admitted that all his reported stories had just been, quote-unquote, a wonderful first-class lie.
Just a prank, bro!
What a douche. Even after Joe had made this confession, people still continued to believe in the monster, mainly those who thought they had actually seen it themselves. There are even more stories here and there throughout the rest of the 18th century, but I want to get to my favorite one. And this is the one I heard from my dad when I was a kid. And after reading through all those other ones, in my opinion, this one is clearly the best. This story was reported by one T.R. Mooney back in 1907. Mr. Mooney says,
"We camped at the eastern shore of Bear Lake just after sundown. After getting our horses tied to a large tree near the water's edge and fed, we started to prepare our supper. My partner, Mr. Horn, called my attention to something out in the lake about a half a mile. As we watched, it would sink into the water for a second and then out again. The lake being perfectly calm, we couldn't account for the strange object, but it came nearer to us and still going down and out of the water. Had it not been for this, we would have thought it a gasoline launch or some other vessel. It was now close enough for us to see that it was some water monster."
out of all the descriptions of the Bear Lake Monster, this one's my favorite, and you'll see why. Let's get back to Mr. Mooney's description. And he says,
"It seemed to be all head, 2 large eyes as large as a front wagon wheel, nose and a mouth like a great large fish. Its arms seemed to come out on either side of its head where its ears would naturally be. The hind legs were long and bent like that of a kangaroo. The hind end was like the tip end of a monster fish. We grabbed our 30-30 rifles and each fired at it, but could not see that we hit him. Before we had time to fire on him again, he turned towards us. Our horses were now very frightened, one of which broke loose. We stepped back into the trees a few feet and both fired. And my God, for the growl that beast let and started towards us like a mad elephant. We ran up the hillside a few rods to a slift of rocks and then began to shoot as rapidly as possible. With every shot, he seemed to get more strength and grow more devilish. We thought of our horse that was tied to the tree, and after reloading our guns, we ran down to protect him, if possible. Just as we reached our campfire, which was blazing up pretty well, we could see that ugly monster raise his front paw and strike the horse to the ground. Then he turned and started for deep water. In our excitement, we began to pour lead at him again, and then with a terrific growl made a terrible swish in the water and sprang towards us. Before we could move, he grabbed the horse with his 2 front paws, opened his monstrous mouth, and crashed his teeth into it like a bull terrier would a mouse. After tearing the horse badly, he made an awful howl, and then was gone plowing through the water. We walked to a ranch up the shore a 1/4 mile and stayed till morning. When we went back in the morning, we found the animal had come back again in the night and carried the dead horse off. He also broke off trees 4 and 5 inches through, also tore large holes in the beach, and his tracks were like those of a bear, but measuring 3 feet long and nearly 2 feet wide.
That is still such a great story. Reports of the Bear Lake Monster diminished significantly after 1915. There have been other reports between now and then, but they all suck. So, do I think that the Bear Lake Monster exists? No. But it's a great way to scare little kids. So here is one of my own photos from Bear Lake taken years ago. As you can see, the lake is that beautiful turquoise blue. It has those white sandy beaches, amazing looking. What is that in the background?